He thought the ink on the divorce papers was his ticket to freedom. Grant Sterling sat in his $50 million boardroom, looked his quiet, unassuming wife in the eye, and signed the dissolution of their marriage while laughing in her face. He called her dead weight. He told her she didn't fit in his world of private jets and IPOs. He had no idea that the woman sitting across from him wasn't just a housewife. She was the hidden heiress to a $1 trillion shadow dynasty that makes the Rockefellers look like middle management. And the moment that pen left the paper, he didn't just sign a divorce, he signed his own execution. This is the story of how Grant Sterling lost everything in 24 hours. The air conditioning in the corner office of Sterling Dynamics was set to a crisp 68 degrees, but for Grant Sterling, the room felt warm with the flush of victory. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson Yards in Manhattan, the steel-grey skyline reflecting in the glass of his Scotch tumbler. He took a sip of the 30-year-old Macallan, savouring the burn. Behind him, at the long mahogany conference table, sat Sarah. She looked small. That was the first thing Grant always noticed about her lately. Over the 7 years of their marriage, Sarah, or Sadie, as he used to affectionately call her before she became a bore, had seemed to shrink. She wore a simple beige cardigan that he knew she bought off the rack at Macy's, her brown hair pulled back in a messy practical bun. She looked like a librarian, or perhaps a substitute teacher. She certainly did not look like the wife of the CEO of the fastest-growing logistics AI company in North America. "Are we doing this, Grant?" Sarah asked. Her voice was steady, void of the hysterics he had anticipated. Grant turned around, flashing the smile that had graced the cover of Forbes just last month. He walked over to the table where his lawyer, Arthur Penhaligon, a shark in a 3-piece suit who billed $105 an hour, was laying out the documents with surgical precision. "We are, Sadie," Grant said, dropping into the leather Eames chair at the head of the table. "Look, don't make this harder than it has to be. You get the house in Connecticut. You get the alimony we agreed upon. It's generous. Frankly, it's more money than you'd ever see in 10 lifetimes, working whatever jobs you plan to do." Arthur pushed a thick stack of papers toward Grant. "The prenuptial agreement holds, Mr. Sterling. The assets of Sterling Dynamics are entirely shielded. She holds no equity. She claims no intellectual property rights. It is a clean break." Sarah didn't look at the papers. She looked at Grant. Her eyes were an unsettling shade of grey, usually warm, but today they were flat. "Is this because of Vanessa?" she asked quietly. Grant let out a sharp, barking laugh. It echoed off the glass walls. "Vanessa? Oh, Sadie, you think this is about a mistress. This is about evolution." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Vanessa Tate is my VP of marketing. She's a killer. She speaks 3 languages. She walks into a room and owns it. When I take this company public next month, I need a partner who looks the part. You're still the girl who coupons for groceries. You're an anchor, Sadie, and I'm trying to fly." He picked up his Mont Blanc fountain pen. The weight of it felt good in his hand. "Grant," Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave, "I'm asking you one last time. Don't do this. Not like this. If you sign those papers, there's no going back. For you." Grant paused, the nib of the pen hovering over the signature line. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw nothing but a pathetic attempt to cling to his wealth. He thought of the text Vanessa had sent him 10 minutes ago. "Champagne is on ice. Hurry up, Tiger." He started to write. The scratching sound was the only noise in the room. "I'm saving you from embarrassment, really," Grant chuckled as he signed his name with a flourish. He dotted the I in Sterling with aggressive force. "You don't belong in this world, Sarah. You never did. I'm doing you a favor." He signed the second copy, then the third. With every signature, his mood lightened. He felt a physical weight lifting off his shoulders. He was free, he was rich, and he was about to become a billionaire. He tossed the pen onto the table, where it clattered loudly. "Done," Grant declared, leaning back and lacing his hands behind his head. "Arthur, give her a copy. Sarah, you can keep the Audi. I've already ordered the driver to take you back to Connecticut. I'll have your things moved out of the penthouse by Friday." He looked at her, expecting tears. He expected begging. Instead, Sarah O'Connell closed the folder in front of her. She didn't sign immediately. She reached into her worn leather tote bag and pulled out a phone. Not the cracked iPhone he knew she had, but a sleek, matte black device with no visible branding. She tapped the screen once. "What are you doing?" Grant asked, annoyed. "Just confirming the timestamp," Sarah said. She picked up the pen he had discarded. She didn't sign with a shaky hand. She signed with a sharp, jagged elegance that looked nothing like the handwriting he knew. She stood up. "You're right, Grant. I don't belong in your world." She slid the papers toward Arthur, who looked momentarily confused by her demeanor. "I belong in the one above it," she whispered. Grant blinked. "Excuse me?" Sarah didn't answer. She turned on her heel and walked toward the heavy oak doors. "Goodbye, Grant," she said without looking back. "Enjoy the champagne." Grant watched her leave, then burst into laughter again. "She's lost her mind," he told Arthur. "Poor girl, probably in shock." "Mr. Sterling," Arthur said, frowning as he looked at Sarah's signature. She didn't sign as Sarah Sterling." "What? What did she sign?" Arthur rotated the paper. "She signed her maiden name. But it's not O'Connell." Grant squinted at the paper. The signature was intricate, archaic. Serafina van der Hoven. "Van der Hoven?" Grant scoffed, pouring himself another drink. "Sounds like a fake name she made up to feel important. Who cares? File it. I have a party to get to." He didn't notice Arthur Penhaligon's face drain of all color. The lawyer's hands were trembling as he touched the paper. Arthur knew that name. Every high-level corporate lawyer in New York knew that name. It was a name whispered in the back rooms of the Swiss National Bank and the halls of The Hague. "Grant," Arthur stammered, his voice cracking. "You need to look at your phone." Grant ignored his lawyer. He was too busy texting Vanessa. "The witch is gone. Free man. On my way." He grabbed his suit jacket and strutted out of the office, bypassing the elevator to take the private executive lift down to the garage where his Aston Martin Valhalla was waiting. He felt invincible. The deal with the Saudis was closing on Thursday, the IPO was set for Tuesday, and he was finally free of the woman who insisted on cooking meatloaf on Friday nights. As the elevator descended, the signal on his phone flickered. He frowned. A notification popped up from his personal banking app. Alert. Card declined. "That's weird," Grant muttered. He tried to refresh the app. It spun in a circle, then displayed a generic error message. "Account access revoked. Please contact your branch administrator." "Glitch," he told himself. "Probably the bank updating their servers." The elevator doors pinged open into the pristine subterranean garage. But his valet, Marco, wasn't there holding the keys to the Aston Martin. Instead, two large men in dark grey suits stood in front of his car. They wore earpieces. They did not look like valets. "Gentlemen," Grant said, stepping out, his voice booming with authority. "Get away from the vehicle." One of the men stepped forward. He held a clipboard. "Mr. Sterling, this vehicle has been seized as collateral. Seized? Grant laughed, though it sounded a bit thinner this time. This car is paid for. I paid cash. 700,000. Get out of my way before I call security. We are security, the man said calmly. Not for the building. For the Van der Hoeven Trust. The title of this vehicle was under the umbrella insurance of your spouse. Since the dissolution of the marriage was time-stamped at 4:12 p.m., the asset protection clause expired. The vehicle belongs to the trust. The trust? What the hell are you talking about? Grant's heart skipped a beat. My wife is a school volunteer. She doesn't have a trust. Please step aside, sir, the man said. Grant reached for his phone to call the police, but the screen changed. It wasn't the banking app anymore. It was a news alert from Bloomberg Terminal. Breaking. Sterling Dynamics stock halted, pending regulatory review. Grant froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving him cold. Stock halted? That wasn't possible. The audit was clean. He had cooked the books, creatively adjusted them, just enough to pass. But nobody knew that. Nobody except... He thought back to late nights in his home office. Sarah bringing him tea. Sarah sitting quietly in the corner, reading while he ranted about the numbers. Sarah, who he thought was listening to audiobooks, but was actually sitting within earshot of his speakerphone calls with the CFO. No, he whispered. He turned and ran back to the elevator, hammering the button for the 40th floor. He needed to get to his office. He needed to call Miller, his CFO. When he burst back into the lobby of Sterling Dynamics, the atmosphere had changed. The quiet hum of productivity was gone. The receptionists were standing up, looking at the television screens mounted on the wall. Phones were ringing off the hook, a cacophony of digital chirps that sounded like a fire alarm. Grant stormed past the reception desk. "Why aren't you answering the damn phones?" he screamed. The head receptionist, a young woman named Chloe, looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Mr. Sterling, we can't." "Why not?" "The lines have been bought." "What does that even mean?" Grant roared. He pushed through the double doors into the trading floor. It was chaos. His top analysts were packing boxes. "Miller!" Grant shouted, spotting his CFO coming out of his office. Miller looked like he had seen a ghost. His tie was undone, and he was sweating profusely. "Grant," Miller gasped, running over. "It's over. Calm down. What's over? The stock halt? We can fix it. I'll call the SEC. It's not the SEC, Grant," Miller hissed, grabbing Grant by the lapels of his $5,000 suit. "It's the creditors, all of them. In the last 20 minutes, Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, and the private equity partners from Singapore all called in their loans, simultaneously. They can't do that. We have 30-year terms." "They triggered the bad boy clause," Miller yelled. "Someone sent them the unedited ledgers, Grant. The real ones. The ones with the inflated user numbers for the AI training data." Grant felt the room spin. Who? Who has those ledgers?" "Only you and I have access to that server," Miller said. "And, well, the backup server at your house." The house. Grant stumbled back. The backup server was in the safe in the library. The combination was his birthday. Sarah knew his birthday. "She leaked it," Grant whispered. "That spiteful little—" "There's more," Miller said, and there were tears in his eyes now. "Grant, look at the buyer." Miller shoved a tablet into Grant's chest. On the screen was a live ticker of the hostile takeover bid that was currently swallowing Sterling Dynamics whole. The stock price was plummeting, and a single entity was scooping up every available share at pennies on the dollar. Buyer, VDH Global Holdings. Principal, S. Van der Hoeven. "VDH," Grant mumbled. "Van der Hoeven." He looked up at the TV screen on the wall. CNN Business had interrupted their programming. The headline bar was red. "Mystery Trillionaire." Family emerges from shadows to acquire sterling dynamics. The news anchor was speaking urgently. Financial insiders are stunned. The Van der Hoeven family, a European banking dynasty, rumored to control assets in excess of $3 trillion, has never made a public acquisition in the United States. Until today. Sources say the acquisition is being led by the family's estrangement daughter, Serafina, who has been living in anonymity in New York for nearly a decade. Grant dropped the tablet. It cracked on the floor. He reached for his phone again. He dialed Sarah. It went straight to voicemail, but the voicemail greeting had changed. It was no longer her sweet, timid voice asking to leave a message. It was a recording of him. It was a recording of what he had said in the boardroom just 30 minutes ago. "You don't belong in this world, Sarah. You never did. I'm doing you a favor." Then, a beep. Grant stared at the phone. His hand shook violently. The elevator doors opened again. This time it wasn't security. It was a woman. She walked onto the trading floor, the click of her heels silencing the chaos. She wore a white power suit that cost more than Grant's car. Her hair was loose, cascading in waves. She wore oversized sunglasses. It was Vanessa. Grant let out a breath of relief. "Vanessa, thank God. You're here. We have to spin this. We have to—" Vanessa walked right past him. She didn't even look at him. She walked straight to the receptionist, Chloe, and handed her a security badge. "I'm here representing the new board of directors," Vanessa said, her voice crisp. "I need access to the CIO's office to clear out personal effects." Grant grabbed Vanessa's arm. "What are you doing? Vanessa, it's me." Vanessa stopped. She slowly lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold, calculating. She looked at Grant's hand on her arm with disgust. "Get your hand off me, Mr. Sterling," she said. "Mr. Sterling, Vanessa, we're supposed to celebrate tonight. I don't date unemployed men with pending fraud indictments," Vanessa said smoothly. "And besides, I just got a better offer. The new owner offered me the position of CEO once you're removed. Triple the salary. And equity." "The new owner," Grant choked out. "Sarah. You're working for Sarah?" Vanessa smirked. "She prefers Ms. Van der Hoeven, and she told me to give you a message." Vanessa leaned in close, smelling of expensive perfume and betrayal. She said, "Tell him the allowance has been cut." Grant stood frozen on the trading floor, the hum of the servers in the glass-walled room behind him, vibrating against the soles of his Italian leather shoes. The silence that had fallen over the office was heavy, suffocating. It wasn't the respectful silence of employees listening to a leader. It was the morbid curiosity of a crowd watching a public execution. Vanessa didn't just walk away. She erased him. She moved toward the executive elevators, her hips swaying with a rhythmic, predatory confidence, flanked by two junior analysts who were already vying for her attention. Grant watched the elevator doors slide shut, cutting off the vision of the woman he had destroyed his marriage for. "Mr. Sterling," the voice came from behind him. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel strike. Grant turned. Standing there were the two men from the garage, the ones in the grey suits. Up close, Grant noticed details he had missed in his earlier arrogance. Their suits weren't just grey. They were a specific, matte charcoal weave that absorbed the light. They wore no badges, no name tags, just small, silver lapel pins shaped like a double-headed falcon, the crest of the Van der Hoeven family. "I'm calling the police," Grant spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and rising panic. "You are trespassing on private property." Property rights for Sterling Dynamics were transferred at 4:32 p.m. EST, the taller man said. His accent was ambiguous, vaguely European, entirely cold. "You are the trespasser, Mr. Sterling. We are here to facilitate your exit." "My exit?" I founded this company. I built this floor plan with my bare hands, Grant shouted, gesturing wildly at the rows of desks. And you sold it for a signature on a divorce decree, the man replied. He extended a hand, palm up. Your keycard, your company phone, and the laptop in your bag. You have got to be kidding me. Now, sir, or we will be forced to assist you. Grant looked around the room for support. He locked eyes with Miller, his CFO. Miller, the man who had been the best man at his wedding, the man who had helped him cook the books. Miller looked down, pretending to be engrossed in tying his shoelace. He looked at Chloe at the reception desk. She bit her lip and turned her head away. He was alone. With a growl of frustration, Grant reached into his pocket and slammed his keycard into the man's palm. He threw the phone. It skittered across the floor. Happy? Grant sneered. I'll have my lawyers destroy this place by morning. You tell Sarah, you tell Serafina, that she's started a war she can't finish. The man didn't blink. He simply gestured toward the elevators. The service elevator, sir. The service elevator. Grant's face went crimson. I take the executive lift. Executive privileges are for executives. You are a liability. The freight elevator is waiting. The walk to the service bay was the longest 100 yards of Grant Sterling's life. It felt like a funeral procession, where he was both the corpse and the mourner. Every step echoed on the polished concrete. He could feel the eyes of 300 employees boring into his back. He heard whispers, shreds of sentences that cut deeper than knives. Did you see the stock ticker? Wife owns everything. Fraud investigation. He kept his chin up, trying to maintain the facade of the untouchable CEO, but his hands were shaking uncontrollably. He balled them into fists to hide the tremors. They reached the freight elevator. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. The doors rattled open. Get in, the grey suit said. Grant stepped inside. He turned to face them, expecting them to follow. We will escort you to the curb, the man said, pressing the button for the ground floor. Do not return to the building. Facial recognition has already flagged you as a persona non grata. If you attempt to enter the lobby, the silent alarms will trigger a police response. This is insane, Grant whispered as the doors began to close. I'm Grant Sterling. Through the narrowing gap of the elevator doors, he saw the man in the grey suit adjust his cuff. Not anymore, the man said. The door slammed shut with a metallic clang. The elevator lurched downward, carrying Grant into the belly of the building he used to rule. He leaned his head against the cold metal wall and closed his eyes, the vibration of the descent rattling his teeth. For the first time in 10 years, he felt small. The sidewalk outside the Sterling Dynamics building was chaotic. It had started to rain, a cold, biting New York drizzle that soaked through fabric in seconds. The evening rush hour was in full swing, a river of yellow taxis and black town cars flowing past. Grant stood on the curb, water dripping from the end of his nose. He had no umbrella. His driver was gone. His car was seized. Standing next to him, shivering in a pinstripe suit, was Arthur Penhaligon. The lawyer looked like he had aged 10 years in the last hour. He was frantically typing on his BlackBerry, his thumbs blurring. Arthur, Grant barked, wiping rain from his eyes. Stop playing with your phone and fix this. Get a judge on the line. I want an emergency injunction. I want to freeze the asset transfer. Arthur didn't look up. I can't, Grant. What do you mean you can't? I pay you a retainer of $20,000 a month to Cannes. Arthur finally lowered the phone. His face was pale, washed out by the neon lights of the passing city. He looked at Grant with a pity that terrified him. You don't understand who we're dealing with, Arthur said, his voice barely audible over the traffic. I just got off the phone with my senior partner. He told me that if I file a single motion against VDH Global, The firm will dissolve my partnership by morning." "Cowards!" Grant screamed at the sky. People walking by gave him a wide berth, assuming he was just another Wall Street psychotic having a breakdown. "Since when does a law firm run from a fight?" "Since the opponent is the Vanderhoven Trust," Arthur hissed, stepping closer, checking over his shoulder, as if he expected to be watched. "Grant, listen to me. You thought you married a quiet girl from Connecticut. You didn't. You married into the Shadow Council. Stop with the conspiracy theories, Arthur. She's Sarah. She knits. She watches cooking shows." "That was camouflage," Arthur said intensely. "I did a deep dive while you were getting kicked out. The Vanderhovens, they don't appear on the Forbes list because they buy the Forbes list. They financed the railways in the 1800s. They bailed out the European central banks after the world wars. They own the lithium mines, the shipping lanes, and half the satellites orbiting the planet right now." Arthur wiped rain from his forehead. "Their motto is Silentium est potentia. Silence is power. They never sue, Grant. They obliterate. And you insulted the heiress." Grant felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He remembered the times he had belittled Sarah, the times he had told her she didn't understand business, the times he had made her wait in the car while he networked at parties. She sat there and took it, he realized. She watched me dig my own grave, inch by inch, for 7 years. "Okay," Grant said, his voice shaking. "Okay, so they're powerful. But I have rights. We have the prenup." "The prenup protects her assets from you," Arthur corrected. "It doesn't protect you from criminal liability. Miller just texted me. The forensic accountants from VDH are already in the servers. They found the inflated user metrics, Grant. They found the shell companies in the Caymans where you were hiding the skimming off the top." "That was standard industry practice," Grant stammered. "It's fraud," Arthur said bluntly. "And now that the company belongs to Serafina Vanderhoven, she has a fiduciary duty to report it. She's going to hand you to the DOJ on a silver platter. It's the perfect cleanup. She acquires the tech, purges the corrupt CEO, and looks like the savior of the industry." Grant staggered back, bumping into a metal trash can. "She planned this. She planned it all." "Since the day you started the affair with Vanessa," Arthur said quietly. "I checked the dates. The first inquiry into your Cayman accounts from a private investigator started 3 days after you booked that hotel room in Miami with Vanessa. Sarah knew. She knew the whole time." Grant felt bile rise in his throat. He needed a drink. He needed to sit down. "Arthur, give me your phone. I need to call my offshore banker. I need to move the liquid cash before they freeze it." Arthur took a step back, clutching his phone to his chest. "No." "Excuse me?" "I'm resigning as your counsel, Grant. Effective immediately." "You can't leave me here." "I have a family," Arthur said, his voice breaking. "I have a mortgage. If I help you move illicit funds, I'm an accomplice. And frankly, I don't want to be on the list of enemies of Serafina Vanderhoven." Arthur turned and hailed a cab. Miraculously, one stopped immediately. "Arthur!" Grant lunged for the door handle, but Arthur locked it from the inside. Through the rain-streaked window, Grant saw his lawyer mouth the words, "Good luck." The taxi sped off, splashing muddy water onto Grant's trousers. He was alone on the street corner. The cold was seeping into his bones. He reached into his pocket for his wallet. He still had his personal credit cards, the black card, the platinum Amex. He saw a bar across the street, the Gilded Lily, an expensive place. He just needed a brandy. He would figure this out after a brandy. He ran across the street, dodging traffic, and pushed through the heavy wooden doors of the bar. The warmth hit him instantly, smelling of roasted coffee and expensive cologne. He walked to the bar and sat down. The bartender, a man he had tipped hundreds of dollars to in the past, looked at him. "Double Macallan 25, Grant ordered, slapping his hand on the counter. The bartender didn't move. He looked down at a tablet on the counter, then back up at Grant. "We can't serve you, Mr. Sterling." "Don't start with me, Jerry. I'm good for it." Grant pulled out his black Amex and slid it across the mahogany. Jerry didn't touch the card. "It's not the money, sir. The system, it's flagged you." "Flagged me for what?" "Red notice," Jerry whispered, leaning in so the other patrons wouldn't hear. "It popped up on the POS system the second you walked in. Service denied. Global embargo." "Sir, that usually only happens for terrorists or sanctions lists." Grant stared at the card. A global embargo. Sarah hadn't just fired him. She hadn't just divorced him. She was unpersoning him. He looked at the reflection in the mirror behind the bar. He saw a wet, desperate man in a ruined suit, and behind his own reflection, he saw the television in the corner of the bar. It was showing live footage of a helicopter landing on the roof of the Sterling Dynamics building. A woman stepped out. Even from the grainy aerial footage, the way she carried herself was unmistakable. Serafina van der Hoven had arrived to take her throne, and Grant Sterling couldn't even buy a drink to toast her victory. New York City had always been Grant Sterling's playground. It was a grid of opportunities, a collection of restaurants where the maitre d' knew his name, and boardrooms where he held court. But as he walked 40 blocks uptown in the pouring rain, the city transformed into a labyrinth of steel and concrete, cold and indifferent. His Italian leather shoes, designed for plush carpets and chauffeured pedals, were ruined. The soles slipped on the wet pavement. His suit, a bespoke charcoal-wool blend, hung off him like a wet rag, heavy and smelling of ozone and exhaust. He reached the Oberon at 8:45 p.m. The building was a needle of glass piercing the sky near Central Park. The penthouse, his penthouse, occupied the top 3 floors. It was the symbol of his arrival. He had bought it 3 years ago. Or so he thought. Grant stumbled under the gold-trimmed awning, seeking refuge from the relentless rain. He wiped his face with a soaking wet sleeve and approached the heavy glass doors. Henry, the night concierge, was at the desk. Henry was a man Grant had tipped $1,000 to last Christmas. Henry was a man who had walked Grant's dog when he was stuck into meetings. Grant reached for the biometric scanner. He pressed his thumb against the glass panel. Access denied. A red light pulsed. A harsh buzzer sounded. "Henry!" Grant shouted, pounding on the glass. "Buzz me in! The scanner is malfunctioning!" Inside the lobby, Henry didn't look up. He was typing something on the computer. He picked up the lobby phone, listened for a moment, and then slowly walked toward the doors. He didn't open them. He stood on the other side of the glass, a few inches and a world away. "Mr. Sterling," Henry's voice came through the intercom speaker, tinny and distorted. "Please step away from the entrance." "Henry, open the damn door! It's me, Grant. I'm soaking wet." "You are no longer a resident of the Oberon, sir," Henry said, his face devoid of its usual warmth. "Management has been instructed to void your lease." "Void my lease? I own the unit." "The unit is held by a shell corporation, Aurora Properties," Henry recited, looking at a clipboard. "Aurora Properties is a subsidiary of the VDH Trust. The tenancy agreement was terminated for cause at 5 p.m. today. Moral turpitude and criminal investigation is listed as the reason." Grant stared at the man. "Sarah. She kicked me out of my own home. Your belongings have been removed, sir." Henry pointed a gloved finger to the side of the building, near the service alley. Grant ran over. There, sitting in the rain, was a pile. It wasn't boxes, it wasn't movers, it was black plastic trash bags. Grant tore open the first bag. His suits, his Tom Ford tuxedos, his cashmere sweaters. They were stuffed inside, wrinkled and wet where the plastic had torn. He found another bag. It contained his awards, the Inc. 500 plaque, the Tech Innovator of the Year trophy. The glass on the trophy was shattered. "No," Grant whimpered. He fell to his knees in the puddles, clutching a wet tuxedo jacket. "This isn't real." He needed help. He needed a place to stay. Vanessa. Vanessa lived on Park Avenue, just 10 blocks away. He had paid the down payment on her condo. It was a secret gift, a consulting bonus that didn't appear on the books. He left the trash bags. He left his ruined clothes. He ran. He ran until his lungs burned, fueled by a mixture of adrenaline and denial. He reached Vanessa's building, a pre-war limestone fortress. He didn't have a key, but the doorman here didn't know him well enough to block him on sight. He slipped in behind a delivery courier. He took the elevator to the 12th floor. He pounded on door 12B. "Vanessa! Vanessa, open up! It's Grant!" Silence. He pounded again. "Vanessa, please! They took everything. Sarah, she's a monster. I need a place to crash, just for tonight. We'll figure this out in the morning." The intercom next to the door crackled to life. "Go away, Grant." Her voice was muffled, but clear enough. "Vanessa. Baby, let me in. I'm wet. I'm freezing." "You're a fugitive, Grant," Vanessa said. "Do you know what's on the news? The SEC is raiding your office right now. The FBI is looking for the hard drives." "I can explain. It's all fixable." "It's not fixable," she snapped. "And I'm not going down with you. I just got off the phone with the new CEO's transition team. Serafina, Ms. van der Hoven. She offered me immunity." Grant froze, his hand hovering over the door. "Immunity? For what?" "For my testimony," Vanessa said. Her voice was icy. "I'm turning state's witness, Grant. I'm giving them the emails. The ones where you told me how to hide the Cayman transfers. The ones where you laughed about Sarah." Grant felt the blood leave his head. You wouldn't." "She offered me a position in the Zurich office," Vanessa continued, her voice softening, but not with kindness, with greed. "Zurich, Grant. A fresh start. All I have to do is tell the truth about you." "I bought this apartment," Grant screamed, slamming his fist against the wood. "I paid for the roof over your head." "Technically," Vanessa replied. "Sterling Dynamics paid for it, which means it belongs to the shareholders, which means it belongs to her. Goodbye, Grant. Don't come back. Security is already on the way up." The intercom clicked off. Grant stood in the hallway, the silence ringing in his ears. He heard the elevator ding at the end of the hall. Heavy footsteps. He turned and ran toward the fire escape. It was 3 a.m. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city slick and reflecting the neon lights in a distorted blur. Grant Sterling sat in a booth at a 24-hour diner on 8th Avenue. It was a place with sticky tables, flickering fluorescent lights, and a menu that smelled of grease and regret. It was the kind of place Grant had joked about demolishing to build a drone delivery hub. He was shivering. His clothes were drying on his body, stiff and uncomfortable. He had checked his pockets. He had no phone, no credit cards, no watch. He had left his Patek Philippe on the nightstand that morning, and it was likely in one of the trash bags he had abandoned. He had found a $20 bill in his jacket pocket. Emergency cash he kept for valet tips. He stared at the menu. He was starving. He hadn't eaten since lunch, which had been a light salad because he was watching his figure for the IPO photos. "What can I get you, hun?" the waitress asked. She was an older woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Doris. She didn't know who he was. To her, He was just another suit who had a bad night. "Coffee," Grant croaked. "Black. And meatloaf." "Meatloaf's yesterday's special. It's a bit dry." "I don't care." When the plate arrived, it looked nothing like Sarah's meatloaf. Sarah used a specific mix of veal and pork. She glazed it with a homemade ketchup reduction that took 3 hours to simmer. She served it with garlic mashed potatoes that were impossibly creamy. Grant took a bite of the diner meatloaf. It tasted like sawdust and salt. He chewed slowly, and to his horror, he felt a tear track down his cheek. He wiped it away angrily. He wasn't crying because of the food. He was crying because he remembered the last time he ate meatloaf. It was 2 weeks ago. Sarah had made it. He had taken one bite, pushed the plate away, and said, "Sadie, this is peasant food. Can't we get a private chef? I'm tired of eating like we're in the suburbs." She had just smiled that sad, quiet smile and taken the plate away. She had eaten the leftovers alone in the kitchen while he took a call. She knew then, Grant realized. She was already the owner of the bank that held my mortgage. She was already the majority shareholder of the shell company that owned my car. And she was making me meatloaf. The bell above the diner door jingled. The air in the diner changed. It wasn't a subtle shift. It was a sudden drop in pressure. 2 men walked in. They weren't the grey-suited security guards. These men were different. They wore black trench coats. They moved with the silent, fluid grace of predators. They didn't look at the menu. They walked straight to Grant's booth. One of them slid into the seat opposite him. The other stood at the end of the table, blocking the exit. The man sitting down was young, perhaps late 20s, with razor-sharp cheekbones and wire-rimmed glasses. He placed a leather briefcase on the sticky table. "Mr. Sterling," the man said. His voice was soft, precise, and British. "My name is Julian Thorne. I am the chief legal counsel for the Vanderhoven family office." Grant put down his fork. "Thorne, never heard of you." "That is by design," Thorne said. "We handle internal matters." "Is this the part where you kill me?" Grant asked, surprised by how little the idea scared him. Thorne smiled. It was a terrifying, thin smile. "Kill you? Heavens no, that would be messy. And Ms. Vanderhoven does not believe in waste." Thorne clicked the latches of the briefcase. He pulled out a single, thick manila envelope. He slid it across the table, pushing aside the half-eaten meatloaf. "What is this?" Grant asked. "This," Thorne said, "is your lifeline." Grant opened the envelope. Inside was a passport, a plane ticket, and a bank card. He looked at the passport. It was his face, but the name was different. George Smith. "Economy class?" Grant scoffed, looking at the ticket. "To Omaha, Nebraska. It is a one-way ticket," Thorne explained calmly. "There is a job waiting for you in Omaha, at a fulfillment center. You will be a shift supervisor on the loading dock. The pay is $18.50 an hour. It comes with dental benefits after 6 months. Grant laughed, a dry, broken sound. "You think I'm going to work in a warehouse? I'm a CEO. I'm a visionary." "You are a felon," Thorne corrected him gently. "Or you will be, by 9 a.m. tomorrow." Thorne leaned forward. "Here is the reality, Grant. The Department of Justice has the files. The indictment is being typed up as we speak. Mail fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, insider trading. You are looking at 20 to 25 years in federal prison." Grant felt the room spin. "So, she's saving me." "Saving?" Thorne tilted his head. "No. This is the alternative sentence. Serafina believes in balance. You told her she didn't understand the value of work. You told her she was dead weight. You built a fortune on the backs of underpaid logistics workers while you drank scotch in a glass tower." Thorne pointed to the ticket. She wants you to learn the business from the ground up. If you get on that plane, the Van der Hoeven legal team will delay the DOJ indictment. We will tie it up in paperwork for decades. You will remain free. But you will live as George Smith. You will punch a clock. You will live in a studio apartment. You will never speak to the press, or the deal is off, and you go to prison. Grant stared at the ticket. Omaha, a warehouse, $18.50 an hour. And if I refuse? Then we walk out that door, Thorne said, checking his watch. And the FBI walks in. They are currently parked 3 blocks away, waiting for my signal. Grant looked out the window. He saw the reflection of the red and blue lights in the distance, waiting. He looked back at the passport. George Smith. Why? Grant whispered. Why not just destroy me? Because, Thorne said, closing his briefcase and standing up. She wants you to remember. Every time your back aches from lifting a box. Every time you budget for groceries. Every time you eat meatloaf in a diner alone. She wants you to remember that you had it all and you laughed it away. Thorne buttoned his coat. The flight leaves at 6:15 a.m., Mr. Smith. Do not be late. The Van der Hoevens despise tardiness. The 2 men turned and walked out, leaving Grant alone in the neon hum of the diner. Grant looked down at the $20 bill in his hand. It wasn't enough to cover the bill and a tip. He looked at the plane ticket. He picked up the last bite of the dry, tasteless meatloaf and put it in his mouth. He swallowed it, choking back a sob. It was time to go to work. The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m., a harsh, jagged sound that scraped against the thin walls of the studio apartment in Omaha, Nebraska. The man who called himself George Smith rolled out of the single bed. His back popped, a sharp, distinct crack that happened every morning now. He groaned, rubbing the stiffness in his lower lumbar region. It was a chronic ache, a physical memory of the thousands of boxes he had lifted over the last 365 days. He shuffled to the kitchenette. It was the size of a closet. He boiled water in a rusty kettle for instant coffee. As he waited, he caught his reflection in the dark window pane. The face staring back was older. The hair, once styled with $50 clay, was thinning and grey at the temples. The skin, once treated with expensive serums, was rough and wind-burned. But the eyes were the most different. The arrogance that had once defined Grant Sterling, the piercing, shark-like gaze that terrified board members, was gone. In its place was a dull, flat resignation. George drank his coffee, black. He put on his uniform, a high-visibility yellow vest over a grey polo shirt. He laced up his steel-toed boots. He walked the 6 blocks to the bus stop in the biting cold. He didn't have a car. The $18.50 an hour didn't stretch far enough for a vehicle, not after rent, and the garnishment the state took for old debts, a fictitious line item on his pay stub that Julian Thorne had arranged to keep him humble. The fulfillment center was a behemoth of corrugated steel, stretching for miles across the flat plains. It was a cathedral of commerce, humming with the sound of conveyor belts and robotic arms. It was, ironically, the most advanced logistics facility in the world, and it belonged to VDH Global. Grant punched his time card. Clunk whir. 5:58 a.m. Morning, George, grunted Mike, the floor supervisor. Mike was 24, had a neck tattoo, and chewed gum with his mouth open. In Grant's old life, Mike wouldn't have been allowed to wash his car. Now, Mike held Grant's livelihood in his hands. Morning, Mike, Grant said softly. Big day today, Mike said, spitting his gum into a trash can. Corporate walkthrough, upper management. We need the floor spotless. You're on zone 4. If you see a piece of lint, you eat it. Got it? Understood. Grant went to Zone 4. He spent the first 4 hours lifting 50-pound boxes of dog food and placing them onto the automated track. Lift, pivot, place, scan, beep, lift, pivot, place, scan, beep. It was a rhythm that numbed the mind. It allowed him to think about the past, which was a dangerous indulgence. He thought about the Scotch. He thought about the Aston Martin. But mostly, he thought about the silence of his house in Connecticut. He realized now that the silence wasn't emptiness. It was peace. A peace Sarah had curated for him. A peace he had shattered with a laugh. Around 10 a.m., the facility went quiet. The conveyor belts slowed to a hum. The usual shouting of the dock workers ceased. "They're here," someone whispered. Grant kept his head down, focusing on a box of kitchen appliances. He didn't want to see the suits. He didn't want to see the people who reminded him of what he used to be. "Attention on the floor," a voice boomed over the PA system. Grant heard the click of heels on the concrete, a distinct, rhythmic sound. Click-clack, click-clack. It was followed by the heavier footsteps of an entourage. He felt the air shift. It smelled faintly of ozone and lavender. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew that scent. It was the soap Sarah used to buy at the farmer's market. He stared at his boots, praying they would pass him by. "And this is the central sortation hub," Mike's voice squeaked, sounding nervous. "Efficiency is up 12% this quarter, Ms. van der Hoven." Grant's breath hitched. He froze, his hands gripping the cardboard box so hard his knuckles turned white. "Impressive," a voice said. It was her. It wasn't the quiet, mousy voice of Sarah the housewife. It was the voice of Seraphina the matriarch. It was rich, commanding, and terrifyingly calm. "However," she continued, "I noticed the spacing on the conveyor belt in Zone 3 is suboptimal. A half-second delay per unit adds up to $3 million in lost revenue annually. Fix it." "Yes, ma'am. Immediately, ma'am." The footsteps moved closer. They stopped right in front of Grant. He could see the hem of her dress, a white wool trench coat that looked like it cost more than the entire warehouse. Next to her were the polished black shoes of her security detail. "And who is this?" she asked. Grant closed his eyes. "Please, just fire me. Just send me to jail. Don't make me look." "That's, George," Mike stammered. "One of our older hires, but he's reliable. Never misses a shift." "George," Seraphina repeated. The name rolled off her tongue like a foreign word. "Look at me, George." Grant slowly straightened his back. He raised his head. He looked into the eyes of his ex-wife. She was breathtaking. The grey cardigan was gone. Her hair was styled in a sleek power bob. She wore diamonds in her ears that caught the harsh warehouse lighting. But it was her face that struck him. She looked younger. The weight of his criticism, the burden of his neglect. It was all gone. She looked free. She looked at him. She studied his face, the lines of fatigue, the grey stubble, the yellow vest. Grant waited for the recognition. He waited for the spark of anger or the smirk of triumph. He waited for her to say, "Hello, Grant." But she didn't. Her eyes swept over him with the same detached interest she had shown the conveyor belt. There was no hate. There was no love. There was simply nothing. To her, he was no longer Grant Sterling, the man she had loved for 7 years. He was just a unit of labor. He was a pixel in her empire. "Your posture is poor," she said coolly. "Lift with your knees, George. We don't want a workers' compensation claim slowing down the line." She turned her head away, dismissing him completely. "Move on," she commanded her entourage. "Yes, Ms. van der Hoven." She walked away, the white coat billowing behind her like a sail. She didn't look back. Not once. Grant stood there, the box of kitchen appliances still in his hands. He watched her disappearance into the vastness of the warehouse. A young man in a suit, one of her assistants, lingered for a second. He walked up to Grant and placed a piece of paper on the conveyor belt next to him. "She wanted you to have this," the assistant whispered, then hurried to catch up with the group. Grant looked at the paper. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a pardon. It was a coupon. Sterling Dynamics. Employee discount. 10% off frozen meatloaf. Grant stared at the coupon. A bubble of laughter rose in his throat. Hysterical, painful, jagged laughter. He realized then the true depth of her punishment. She hadn't just taken his money. She hadn't just taken his freedom. She had taken his significance. She didn't hate him enough to destroy him. She had simply moved on to a universe where he didn't matter. "Hey, George!" Mike yelled from down the line. "Quit daydreaming. We got a quota to hit." Grant Sterling, the man who used to sign million-dollar contracts with a gold fountain pen, crumbled the coupon and put it in his pocket. "Yes, boss," he called back. He bent his knees. He lifted the box. Lift, pivot, place, scan, beep. The sound echoed in the cavernous warehouse, marking the passing of another second in a life that belonged to someone else. And that is how the man who laughed at his wife ended up scanning boxes in a warehouse she owned. Grant Sterling learned the hardest lesson of all. True power doesn't roar. It whispers. He mistook Sarah's silence for weakness and her kindness for stupidity. He spent 7 years chasing status, only to realize that the most valuable thing he ever had was the woman sitting across the dinner table, the woman he threw away for a signature. In the end, the dead weight he tried to cut loose was the only thing keeping him afloat. When he signed those papers, he didn't just sign a divorce. He signed his resignation from a life he never appreciated until it was gone. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button right now. It helps the channel more than you know. What do you think? Did Grant deserve his fate, or was Serafina's revenge too cruel? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about instant karma and hidden identities, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you laugh at on your way up, because you might meet them on your way down.